Hi young adults. Today we're going to look at Module 10, specifically the parts of the nervous system and what a reflex is. So for this video, you're going to need your Module 10 notes out on your desk, and you're going to need your Module 10 packet. The Module 10 packet looks like this, and it's something that your sub will have and will need to give out to you, right? So this is your Module 10 packet. Okay, so once again, for today, we're going to go over parts of the nervous system and what a reflex is. Okay, so for your Module 10 packet, this is asking you to fill in and annotate the parts of the nervous system. So we'll start at the very top. So the component that we'll look at is the nervous system. In terms of the nervous system, we'll just put down kind of our definition. It's the body's speedy electrochemical communication network. Okay, so the speedy electrochemical communication network. And once again, just a reminder, it uses neurons, and the part that's electrical is the action potential, and the part that is chemical are neurotransmitters. Okay, so that's kind of like our heading, right? So we're talking about the whole nervous system, right? That's one of the two communication systems in your body, the second one being the endocrine system. So we're going to focus today just on the nervous system. So the nervous system is split into two parts. The first part is the central nervous system. Okay? The central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay? So once again, central nervous system, two parts, the brain and the spinal cord. So if the central nervous system is only made up of the brain and spinal cord, what type of neuron would you find here? What type of neuron would you find in the central nervous system if it's the brain and the spinal cord? Remember, there are three types of neurons: sensory neurons, interneurons, and motor neurons. So in the central nervous system that's made up of the brain and the spinal cord, you would only find interneurons, because interneurons are only in, and they actually compose the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so the first subdivision of the nervous system, it's the central nervous system, and over here it is the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS. Okay, and I will go ahead and do that in purple. So this is the peripheral nervous system. When we talk about the peripheral nervous system, this is what's going to connect the central nervous system to the rest of the body. Right, so I'm going to kind of draw my person over here. Right, so if the central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord, right, there's the brain, here's your spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system would be any part of the nervous system. It's basically kind of the rest of your body. It's going to connect the rest of your body to your brain and your spinal cord. Okay, so that would be your peripheral nervous system. It is responsible for gathering information from the environment and transmitting that information to the central nervous system or to other body parts, right? So in terms of like you're sweating, it's hot, right? Bringing the information from your senses would be your peripheral nervous system, bringing that to the spinal cord, up to your brain, and you're thinking, you're like, I'm going to take off my sweatshirt, right? So that's part of this idea of the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is subdivided into two pieces. Okay, It's subdivided into two pieces. The first is the somatic nervous system. Somatic nervous system. Okay? And that is going to control voluntary movement of your skeletal muscles. If something is voluntary, it's like you're choosing to move, right? So it's a division of the peripheral nervous system, so it's part of the peripheral nervous system, but it controls voluntary movement of your skeletal muscles. Okay, so this is what allows your voluntary movements. The second part of the peripheral nervous system would be the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system. And the word autonomic should kind of remind you of the word automatic. So I'll put that there. So you have automatic, it's autonomic. If something's automatic, it typically happens on its own, right? So this is part of the peripheral nervous system that controls the glands and muscles of internal organs, such as, I'll put in parentheses, like the heart. It also controls glandular activity. Glandular activity. Okay? So once again, autonomic, these are things that are happening typically, quote unquote, automatically. So it's controlling the glands, the muscles, internal organs of your internal organs, different gland activities, so think of pituitary. So those are different things that the autonomic nervous system controls. Okay. And then the autonomic nervous system is split into two. Now, I know autonomic, typically if things are automatic, they're not things that you can control, right? So I'm going to put over here kind of this idea that typically they're involuntary, right? Like you're telling your muscles to contract and expand for your lungs to inflate. Like that's not something that you're consciously choosing to do. That being said, the autonomic nervous system is kind of like autopilot in the sense that you can override it, right? Like how do you override your autonomic nervous system? Like you hold your breath. Like that's another way of you trying to control what's happening automatically in terms of like your heart beating. Okay? So the autonomic nervous system is divided into two parts. The first one is the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is right here. In terms of the function, it's part of the autonomic nervous system, and it's in charge of arousing the body, mobilizing its energy, in stressful situations. Okay, so it's in charge of arousing the body, mobilizing its energy in stressful situations. Right, so it's arousing the body to expand the energy. There were two diagrams, or one diagram I should say, in your book that had the outline of a person and like the skeletal frame, and it gave you examples of like all the different things the sympathetic nervous system does and all the things the parasympathetic does, and it would be a good idea for you to write those down in your book or in your notes. Okay, an example of the sympathetic nervous system would be this idea of like if I'm walking home in college, I'm walking home late at night and I start to hear footsteps behind me, right? And so my heart rate starts to increase, right? More oxygen is flowing to my muscles because I'm preparing for fight or flight, right? And those footsteps get closer and closer and closer, right? And I feel like someone's right behind me. So the mobilizing energy, right, that you're gonna either turn around and see who it is or start running, is the sympathetic nervous system. It's arousing the body, it's mobilizing its energy In this case, the stressful situation would be like the sound of footsteps approaching late at night when I'm by myself. Okay, so that would be the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is part of the autonomic nervous system that is responsible for calming the body down. So we'll put parasympathetic nervous system, and it's responsible for calming the body. And it's all about conserving its energy. And kind of the goal here is to get the body back into homeostasis. Right? That idea of balance, balanced state. The goal is to get it into homeostasis. So for parasympathetic, in that same example, right? I'm walking home late at night. I'm in college. There's no one else around, and I start to hear footsteps behind me, right? Those footsteps. The sympathetic nervous system is preparing me for fight or flight. So I'll put that kind of over here. Fight or flight. Okay? So, you know, my lungs are expanding, more oxygen's being pumping to my legs because my heart beats faster. My pupils will dilate so I can see better. Your bladder is suppressed, so like if you had to go to the bathroom, you no longer do because your focus is now on whatever that stressful situation is. The parasympathetic nervous system is what's responsible for calming me back down. So let's say in that same scenario, I decide to turn around. And I turn around and I see that it's actually just my friend trying to catch up to me because she saw I was walking by myself. That kind of overwhelming feeling of like relief is the parasympathetic nervous system. And then my body's trying to get back into homeostasis, right? So my heartbeat slows down. My pupils are going to contract back to their regular size. My bladder will no longer be inhibited. So like if I had to go to the bathroom, I'll remember that I have to go to the bathroom. Your appetite will no longer be suppressed, right? In terms of your pancreas. Your adrenal glands will stop producing adrenaline, right? So those are all part of the parasympathetic nervous system. In terms of types of neurons, if you think about it, the central nervous system is made up of the brain and spinal cord, so it has interneurons. But if you look at this idea of the autonomic somatic nervous systems, when you think about it this way, right, what types of neurons would you see here? If the central nervous system has interneurons, the peripheral nervous system is going to have what types of neurons? Well, the peripheral nervous system would have sensory neurons, because the sensory neurons are bringing information in, right? So if you were going to high five someone and you need to move your hand to actually hit the pressure, the sensory neurons would pick up on the pressure points of someone else's hand and communicate that towards the spinal cord, which would be interneurons. So you have sensory neurons picking up information from your senses. That's part of peripheral, because remember, it's connecting the central nervous system to the rest of the body, like your hands and legs. And you would also have motor neurons, because the motor neurons are responsible for movement, right? So when information comes back down your spinal cord, it's going to connect up with motor neurons of the peripheral nervous system, because peripheral is on the edge, right? It's the rest of your body, anything outside of your brain and spinal cord. So those motor neurons would pick up that information and connect to muscles and tell them to contract. Okay? So that's kind of our overview of the entire nervous system. I'll have to make a second video for reflexes because I ran out of time on this one. Hope you enjoyed it, young adults.